tonight. But first, the main BBC News at 10.
At 10, we're on the ground in Haiti, a country spiralling out of control. Born into anarchy, the streets beyond this hospital ruled by gangs deciding who lives and who dies.
I'll report from this conflicted Caribbean nation as it continues to unravel into gang violence and political instability.
Targeting the Houthis in the Red Sea, where on board a US Navy warship. Notts Forest drop into the relegation zone of the Premier League, docked 4 points for breaking financial rules. And a new bit of street art in North London. And yes, it's a Banksy.
In the northwest,
I just don't see it as my choice, I see it as my destiny.
a college student who wrote a how-to terror guide is jailed for 13 years. And a Ramadan warning as thieves target Muslim families for their gold.
Good evening. There seems little the world can do for the moment, but simply watch as Haiti slides further and further into anarchy. Gangs control much of the capital Port-au-Prince, where the bodies of at least a dozen people were discovered in a wealthy suburb today, amid fighting with machete-wielding militias trying to protect their own neighborhoods. It's been over 2 weeks since we saw these scenes, the aftermath of a jailbreak which triggered a state of emergency in the Caribbean nation with few resources for the police to properly fight back. And now, caught in the middle, are hundreds of thousands of people made homeless by the fighting amid dire shortages of food. Well, America is hopeful a transitional council might be able to restore order, along with the deployment of international troops. But for now, the violence continues. Well, Will Grant is live in the port city of Cap-Haïtien for us tonight. Will.
Yeah, it's been another day of shocking violence here in Haiti, Clive. Armed gangs have shaken the capital city to its utter core. The problems, however, of the security collapse are just some of the challenges that people here face, and just a warning that some people may find the images in my report upsetting from the very start. The grisly aftermath of a gang rampage. Following a morning killing spree in which the home of a judge was also attacked, at least a dozen bodies were left on the streets of a neighbourhood in Port-au-Prince. And this is supposedly the safe part of town. The latest violence serves as a reminder, if anyone needed, that Haiti remains closer to anarchy than stability. And that makes it almost impossible for so many here to lead anything that resembles their normal lives amid the chaos. Just a day old, baby Woodley's first cries are the same of those of children born anywhere, for food and for comfort. But as they get older, the children born in Cap-Haïtien's maternity wing will find such essentials are far from guaranteed in Haiti. Markinson Joseph tells me she would take her newborn boy out of the country altogether if she gets the chance, but she doesn't have the money to flee.
The first room for pathology.
As he shows us around dark and empty wards, Dr. Clairville says the gang's control of the roads is making it impossible to find enough fuel to keep the lights on, let alone to bring in the drugs and equipment they need.
As you can see, we have beds and staff, but often the patients just can't reach us because of their economic situation, or more often than not, their safety.
For some, it has had terrible consequences. Louise Mani was 8.5 months pregnant when she came into hospital. By then, she had dangerously high blood pressure and lost the baby. Preeclampsia is treatable had she been properly monitored or the baby been delivered early. Louise Mani knows her loss was avoidable. The head of UNICEF has called the situation in Haiti horrific and likened the lawlessness to the post-apocalyptic film Mad Max. The security situation aside, the humanitarian need here is critical, and the aid response so far has been painfully slow. The essential things of life are increasingly hard to find. In Port-au-Prince, Vara Oxima and her 9 children have been forced from their home by the violence, and she's struggling to provide the food and water they need. Only God can change this place, she says, because from where I'm sitting, I can't see where any other change is coming from. The gangs have such a grip of Haiti, they are in essence dictating what happens next in this country, who can govern it, who lives in it, and who dies.
Shocking pictures in that report, Will. I mean, I mentioned a little earlier the possibility of a transitional council and foreign troops trying to calm things down. What do you think the chances are of such a council actually getting up and running?
Well, it's almost a week, or it's even been over a week, in fact, since the US State Department said that they thought a council would be in place within maybe 48 hours. So it's still ambitious to expect they'll have it in place in the short term. We are hearing that it's sort of in the offing, but one has to think, you know, what will it be able to achieve? In that violence that we saw in the capital city there was also an attack on a judge's house. And to me, that is a pretty clear message being delivered, that the political elites who would be president, who are making the sort of efforts to work out who would be in power, you know, the gangs are telling them, we're not sure we want any of you. And we are not prepared to stop fighting unless we get some kind of administration we agree with who would potentially, for example, give them an amnesty. Clive.
OK, Will, thank you for that. Will Grant there live in Cap-Haïtien in Haiti. Now, 8 men have been sentenced for their part in disturbances last year outside a hotel on Merseyside housing asylum seekers. A protest at the Suites Hotel in Kirby last February descended into acts of violence, criminal damage and disorder as fireworks, rocks and paving slabs were thrown at the police. Rowan Bridge has that story.
Violence on the streets of Merseyside. The yellow circle shows one of the men sentenced today for his part in the attack on police in a hotel housing asylum seekers. It was sparked by a video appearing to show an asylum seeker asking a teenage girl for a kiss. What started as a peaceful protest descended into hours of trouble. As police try to control the situation, the crowd turns on one of their vans. Officers were pelted with petrol bombs, rocks and fireworks. And these are some of the men responsible. Today they were sentenced for their parts in the disorder. Judge Anthony Watson described the events of the night as sustained and extremely hostile mob violence, which had brought shame on the town of Kirby, the borough of Knowsley and Merseyside more generally. 3 officers were injured, 1 treated in hospital. More than £83,000 of damage was caused on the night.
It was a really complex and lengthy investigation. You know, there was over 150 hours worth of footage from body-worn video, drone footage, private CCTV that had to be reviewed.
Despite the asylum seekers having been moved from Knowsley, today's sentencing highlights broader tensions that haven't gone away. How to deal with asylum seekers continues to be a contentious political issue. Rowan Bridge, BBC News, Liverpool.
A victorious President Putin has been addressing supporters in Moscow's Red Square after his landslide win in Russia's presidential election. The Kremlin says he won more than 87% of the vote, but Western governments and Russian critics have called it a pseudo-election and a sham that was neither free nor fair. There was no real opposition on the ballot, with leading figures either in jail, in exile or dead. Here's our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg.
After the landslide came the love. Vladimir Putin, portrayed by the Kremlin as a national hero at a concert marking 10 years since Russia annexed Crimea. Long live Russia, he cried. Cue the national anthem. And some Kremlin choreography to make it look as if Putin is Russia and Russia is Putin. Earlier, we saw the crowds pouring towards Red Square. Thousands of Russians had been given free tickets for the Putin event. After all, a president who claims to have won 87% of the vote needs a decent audience.
Western leaders have dismissed Russia's presidential vote as neither free nor fair, a stage-managed election. But the Kremlin couldn't care less what the West thinks. It paints a picture of a president who enjoys the overwhelming support of his people. Down at the Russian Election Commission, they'd counted all the votes and they presented all their figures. So, it's 6 more years of President Putin. But what does that mean for Russia and for the world?
It doesn't mean anything good for Russia, for Ukraine, for the world, because Putin will continue this permanent war. Putin will continue to suppress civil society inside his country, and in that sense he becomes a full-blooded autocrat, dictator.
And yet the direction of travel for Russia under Vladimir Putin is already clear. More confrontation abroad and repression at home. Few here seem to believe that this election will bring a significant change. If it's the same president, Katya says, then I don't think anything will be different. In a country that's been ruled by the same man for a quarter of a century, Russians are starting to forget what change looks like. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Well, Sarah Rainsford is in the city of Sumy in eastern Ukraine near the Russian border. And Sarah, one wonders how the news of 6 more years of Vladimir Putin at the helm, how that's gone down where you are.
Well, Ukrainians always refer to the Russian elections in quote marks as the so-called elections. They always knew, of course, that Vladimir Putin was staying in the Kremlin, and what that means is very clear for here in Ukraine. It means more missile strikes, it means more drones, it means more darkness like this when the curfew falls at night in towns like this, Sumy up in the north. You know, in Moscow for years the Kremlin has been building up this idea that Putin is Russia. But I think for Ukraine, Putin is Bucha, he's Mariupol, he's Bakhmut, he's all those names that are synonymous with suffering. I think, you know, this invasion of Ukraine has become the defining feature of Vladimir Putin's presidency, and it is still going on. So we're up here in Sumy in the north of the country, and there's been intense shelling on the border in recent days. There are people evacuating their homes. They have no idea when or even whether they're going to be going back there. We've also been talking to people who've been fleeing from occupied areas of eastern Ukraine, those people who don't want to live in Russia to be part of a country that has invaded their country. You know, nothing here in Ukraine has been normal now for more than 2 years since Vladimir Putin launched that full-scale invasion. And now Ukraine is facing another 6 years, at least, of Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin. And as you saw in Steve's piece there, they are celebrating that on Red Square. But here in Ukraine, it means nothing good at all.
OK, Sarah, thank you. Sarah Rainsford there, our Eastern Europe correspondent in northern Ukraine. Now, a senior member of Rishi Sunak's cabinet says Conservative MPs should stop speculating about ousting the Prime Minister. The Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, was speaking after a whirlwind of reports that some MPs want the Leader of the Commons, Penny Mordaunt, to take over before the election. Chris is here with me in the studio. Is it really likely that we could get a change of leadership before the election this year?
Well, most Conservative MPs I speak to, Clive, do think that that idea is bonkers. But these are real spasms of anguish from Conservative MPs. Almost all I speak to are in a pretty bleak, black mood about the party's prospects, and some are willing to contemplate what some of their colleagues regard as bonkers because they think it's just better than sticking with what they've got. Why are they saying this? They're saying it because they fear that anything that Rishi Sunak tries now isn't working, that perhaps people have stopped listening, that he cranks a lever in Downing Street, and even if what he does is popular, it doesn't make any difference to their prospects. Take the tax cuts, for instance, in the budget. Then other Conservative MPs are saying Downing Street keep making too many mistakes in their view, so they point to how long it took the Prime Minister to describe those alleged remarks from a donor as racist. They talk about Lee Anderson, the guy who was flung out of the Conservative Parliamentary Party and then went on to join Reform UK, and they think there's a lack of judgment in Downing Street. Now, Rishi Sunak makes the argument that the economic picture is improving. He's hoping that there might be some good news as far as inflation is concerned on Wednesday. Tonight in the House of Commons, a whole load of amendments to his Rwanda migrant plan have been overturned, and that looks like it could happen. There could be flights going relatively soon. But again, it comes back to the point Conservative MPs say, OK, if that happens, that'd be good, but will it make any difference? And those who would like to see the back of Rishi Sunak look ahead to the local elections coming up at the beginning of May and think that that could be a moment of real jeopardy for him, because if the Conservatives do badly, as is expected, do even more Conservative MPs conclude it's worth doing something their colleagues think is bonkers.
All right, OK. Chris, thank you. Chris Mason, our political editor. A man has been arrested and charged with attempted murder after 2 people were shot with a crossbow earlier this month. The woman and man were attacked in Shoreditch in East London, 10 days apart. The 47-year-old remains in police custody. The United Nations-backed report says famine is imminent in northern Gaza as the war between Israel and Hamas continues. The UN is warning that 1 million people, that's half of the territory's population, are now facing starvation. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, accused Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war, a claim Israel rejects. Orla Guerin, our senior international correspondent, has more from Jerusalem.
Sheer desperation in Gaza City today, and a tiny window of hope. This crush is to get a few kilograms of flour. Most don't manage it. There's nothing to eat or drink, says Omar. Children are dying. There are massacres when planes drop aid and people die. The EU says Israel is provoking famine and has turned Gaza into a killing ground.
Gaza was before the war the greatest open-air prison. Today is the greatest open-air graveyard. A graveyard for tens of thousands of people.
And in that graveyard today, another round of battle. This time at Al-Shifa, Gaza's largest hospital. Teeming with wounded in these recent pictures and home to many seeking shelter. Now the Israeli army is back again, hunting Hamas, it says. Soldiers shot their way in overnight, claiming they came under fire. Doctors told the BBC 3 patients died because the electricity was cut off.
The IDF is conducting a high-precision operation in limited areas of Shifa Hospital. We know that senior Hamas terrorists have regrouped inside the Shifa Hospital and are using it to command attacks against Israel.
The army has been here before. This was last November, showing off tunnels under Al-Shifa and facing widespread condemnation for raiding a hospital. Now it's back again for a 4th time, hardly a sign of victory. And once again, war-weary families forced to flee the area around Al-Shifa. This young boy says, "We were sleeping when they started bombing. They shelled our home and there was shooting. Afterwards they let us out. They undressed the men and took them to the tanks." In Gaza now, no escape from bombs or from hunger. Before the eyes of the world, famine is closing in. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Jerusalem.
A senior US Navy officer at the heart of the joint operation with the UK to protect shipping in the Red Sea has told the BBC it's one of the most intense missions since World War II. A task force of British and American ships has been carrying out strikes against Iranian-backed Houthis from Yemen, whose attacks on merchant vessels have seriously disrupted international trade. Jonathan Beale is the first British journalist allowed on board the American aircraft carrier leading the operation.
A US carrier, a potent symbol of American military power. Now being used against Houthi rebels. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, operating in the Red Sea, trying to protect merchant ships and themselves from Houthi attacks. we're the first British media on board since it began this mission, flying scores of sorties round the clock. And it's been relentless.
Yes, yeah, this is probably the most flying I've done on a deployment.
It's the most intense so far.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. It's every day we're flying a ton. So.
Shuttle Cat 3, stand by.
Daylight tells the story of what they've been doing. The bombs and missiles fired at Houthi targets on land, and the drones they've destroyed from the air. On this one carrier alone, they've already used hundreds of munitions. But the Houthis too are developing more sophisticated attacks, posing the greatest threat to the US Navy in recent history.
This is deadly stuff. This is the most since World War II, easily.
What, the most intense?
Oh, very much so. You know, ballistic missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, UAVs, now USVs or underwater vessels, UUVs. The game's all out there, and we've been doing this for almost 4 months now.
Houthi attacks on merchant shipping began soon after Israel's assault on Gaza. US and UK military intervention since has tried to stop them to protect this key trade route. These US jets have been flying missions to target the Houthis every single day for months now. And yet all this US firepower still hasn't been able to deter them, yet alone defeat them. And America believes the Houthis are not acting alone. But there are political concerns about widening this conflict.
We know Iran is in some way backing the Houthis, and like I said, they're doing it via intelligence support, providing targeting. They're also providing resupply of weapons, and they're providing them expertise as well.
Well, you're going after the wrong people then. You should be going after Iran.
Well, that's a policy decision, but the root of this does start with Iran.
The question is, how long can the US maintain this military presence? Jonathan Beale, BBC News, on board the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Nottingham Forest have been docked 4 points for breaching Premier League profit and sustainability rules. The sanction is immediate and means they drop below Luton Town into the bottom 3 relegation zone. Here's Laura Scott.
Frustration at the final whistle for Nottingham Forest after letting a lead slip against their relegation rivals. Points deduction, it's coming for you, the Luton Town fans sung. And they weren't wrong. 2 days on and Forest were ruining another result as an independent commission found them guilty of breaching profit and sustainability rules by £34 million and docked them 4 points, plunging them into the bottom 3 below Luton with 9 games to play. Last month, Everton were docked 6 points for breaching the same rules, reduced from 10 on appeal, and face another possible points deduction this season. Within this 50-page judgment, the Premier League insisted that sporting sanctions are the only way to meaningfully disincentivise overspending by clubs. But the result is that a team's fate in the league could be determined by a lawyer's performance in a boardroom rather than players on a pitch, and that doesn't sit well with some.
A league exists and excels on its sporting integrity. And I think when you have a table that may have 2 asterisks in it and possibly 3 at some stage, that is a big problem for sporting integrity.
But it's been more than a year since champions Manchester City were charged with more than 100 alleged rule breaches, and Forest fans aren't happy that case is yet to be heard.
It's just disgusting. And what about Man City? What's happening to them?
I just think they're going after the wrong people.
We shouldn't be dishing out sanctions when Man City are able to win their treble titles over and over again, and we might get relegated.
A furious Forest have warned this decision threatens the competitiveness of the league at a time when the sustainability of the whole football pyramid is in the spotlight and the government is poised to intervene. Laura Scott, BBC News.
She's Britain's most successful female Olympian, and now Dame Laura Kenny has decided it's time to retire from track cycling. She's won 5 Olympic golds and 7 World Championship titles in an extraordinary career and was targeting a 4th Olympics in Paris this summer, but her mind's been changed by the birth of her second child. Here's Dan Rowan.
No British woman in history has savoured as much Olympic success as Laura Kenny.
Well, it went down to the wire, and I can't believe it.
One of the faces of London 2012, she won 2 goals in her first games, but they were just the start of the ride. More than a decade at the top of track cycling brought Kenny 3 more Olympic titles. But now she says she's crossed the line for the final time.
I have decided that I'm going to retire from professional cycling. I always knew deep down that I would know when was the right time. And you're never going to have a perfect time to do it, but I can sit here today and say, now is the right time for me. I've just had an absolute blast, but now is the time for me to hang that bike up.
One half of British sport's golden couple, Laura married teammate Jason Kenny, now the country's most decorated Olympian. They became parents in 2017, but she came back to win at the Tokyo Games, keen to show that athletes could juggle the demands of elite sport and motherhood.
Dominated the race from start to finish.
Since then, Kenny's faced personal trauma, speaking openly about miscarriage and an ectopic pregnancy. Last year, she had her second son, and with just a slim chance of reaching the Paris Olympics, she decided to put family first.
Just the sacrifices of leaving your children and your family at home is really quite big. And the more people ask me what races was I doing, what training camps was I going on, I didn't want to go. And then once I said to Jace, you know, I don't think I want to ride a bike anymore, I started to feel relief then, to be totally honest.
Since arriving here at the National Velodrome in Manchester as a young rider some 14 years ago, Laura Kenny has firmly established herself as a true British sporting legend. But by speaking openly about the pain that she's endured away from cycling, she's ensured that her legacy extends well beyond her achievements here on the track.
But those achievements are formidable. Alongside her 5 Olympic golds over 3 games, Kenny retires having amassed 7 World Championship titles, 14 European titles and 2 Commonwealth golds. Today, another British Olympic legend paid this tribute.
She's never changed, she's always been fun, she's always had an incredibly down-to-earth attitude about it, really made it feel, you know, this is something that other people could aspire to do and aspire to be, and I think she's been so influential and so inspirational for, you know, mothers who have come back, who still want to be in sport but having children, having a family, and she's managed to balance so much.
Kenny's achievements are all the more remarkable given she was born 6 weeks premature with a collapsed lung. Her determination driving her to the very pinnacle of cycling and a place in British sporting history. Dan Rowan, BBC News.
Now, look at this. Is it, or isn't it, a Banksy? Well, the elusive street artist has confirmed this mural that suddenly appeared on the side of a building in Finsbury Park in North London over the weekend is his latest creation. Ellie Price has been to have a look.
It's not that impressive close up, but it all makes sense when you see it with the tree. When Banksy comes to town, so does everyone else. A treat for the locals who just happen to be passing.
I think it's amazing, honestly. I've always known about Banksy's artwork. I didn't actually know that there was going to be one so close to home, so yeah, really nice to see.
I think it's incredible. We were just out on a little morning walk and just happened to stumble across it, and I think it's wonderful.
I came inside the house and I started calling the children, wake up, something is going on out there.
Even by this morning, the artwork had already attracted international interest. They'd heard about it watching telly in the hotel.
So we just took the bus. We're leaving in 2 hours, but we just came here to see it.
Locals told us that the wall got its makeover in the early hours of yesterday morning. And here's another thing they noticed. The green of the leaves is the same colour as Islington Council's signage. Experts reckon Banksy's message is an obvious environmental one.
This is a particularly big thing because of its scale and because of the clarity of the message and the fact that it exists in this built environment in a really clever and smart way.
The last time a Banksy was found, it lasted less than an hour before somebody took it down, in broad daylight. Also in broad daylight, in fact in front of a packed auction house, there was this iconic painting that shredded itself in its own frame just after it was sold. And don't forget, 10 years ago we had slave labour, and the owners of the building chipped it off and tried to sell it at an auction. Not a terribly popular decision locally. The local MP here is pretty confident this one will stay put.
Already it's put us on the map
Finsbury Park has got a Banksy. The wall clearly needed repainting anyway, so Banksy's just helping out.
Confirmation this work is the real deal will only attract more visitors. And at 30 foot high, with a big tree in front, Finsbury Park's newest artwork is hopefully not going anywhere soon. Ellie Price, BBC News, in North London.
Let's just hope all the rain doesn't wash it off.
Well, there will be some rain, Clive. I hope he thought of that. I would think he probably did. But it wasn't all rain today. We had a little bit of sunshine in places, not least in South Wales. In fact, temperatures not too far away. In Cardiff, got very close to 17 degrees today. So a mild start to the week. That won't last. It's going to turn colder later. And yes, there will be some spells of wind and indeed some spells of rain. This is the rain we're expecting to accumulate through this week. The wettest weather up towards the north and the west. In fact, over high ground in western Scotland, I think we're likely to see more than 50 millimetres of rain. The ground is so wet right now that any further rain will just bring the risk of further flooding. So outbreaks of rain pushing eastwards through tonight. Very windy in the north of Scotland here. Squally showers with some thunder and lightning mixing in, but really mild overnight, 8, 9 or 10 degrees. So as we head into tomorrow, there will be areas of showery rain around. I think this stripe of cloud may linger for a while across East Anglia and the southeast, but for most, we will see some sunny spells breaking through. Still the odd rogue shower, cloud and rain pushing back into the southwest of England by the end of the day. The winds in the north of Scotland easing as the day wears on, and those temperatures 13 to 16 degrees. Again, pretty mild, even feeling warm in any sunshine. But tomorrow evening, we will see these outbreaks of rain pushing northwards and eastwards. A frontal system that will be with us. Yes, more rain with that on Wednesday. And then that will clear away southeastwards. More wind and rain across the north of the UK on Thursday. But as those fronts clear through, we'll watch what happens to the winds. The winds start to come down from the north, and that will make it feel colder for the end of the week. In fact, across some hills in the north of the UK, we could see some wintry showers. And yes, for many of us, some more rain. Clive.
All right, Ben, thank you. Ben Rich there. That's it here on BBC One. It's now time to join our colleagues for all the news where you are. Have a very good night.
Thanks. I'm Yunus. Mulla. Welcome to North West Tonight. A Liverpool student has been sent to a young offenders institute and will be detained for 13 years after saying he wanted to kill 50 people. He was cleared of planning a bombing attack but was convicted of possessing and sharing terrorist material. Ian Haslam reports.
I just don't see it as my choice. I see it as my destiny and my calling, as I need to do this.
Jacob Graham made more than 100 videos from his bedroom at his mother's home in Norris Green. Using the name Destro the Destroyer, he claimed he wanted to kill at least 50 people. In the house, police found chemicals used to make explosives and various weapons.
It's a nice bit of kit.
Graham also shared a guide on using bombs, guns and poisons. He told the jury his activities were just escapism and fantasy. They disagreed.
I am satisfied that you are a dangerous offender. I am satisfied that there is a significant risk to members of the public of serious harm by you committing serious specified terrorism offences.
The courts heard Graham blame the government for his unsatisfactory life. He also spoke of feeling wronged by his college and ecological concerns and claimed he wanted to finish what US terrorist Theodore Kaczynski, known as the Unabomber, had started.
You know, if the news gets out there that there's been a bombing and stuff, and then like my name comes out, people will start searching me.
Other individuals could have accessed that material and gone on to conduct their own terrorist attacks. And the seriousness of that offence has been reflected by the sentence that's been handed down by the court today.
Police also today reiterated what they describe as the growing threat of online extremism in cases like this.
Depending on your circumstances, you can sometimes get put down the rabbit hole, as it were, to the point where you are existing in an echo chamber online where negative emotions are reinforced, where grievances are fuelled, and where in some instances there is incitement to violence.
Graham showed no reaction to his sentence, but later smiled at his mother in the public gallery, who had burst into tears as he was jailed. Ian Haslam, BBC North West Tonight.
Police arrested 2 Manchester United fans for alleged tragedy chanting during the FA Cup quarter-final against Liverpool. A Manchester United fan was also detained on suspicion of racially aggravated public disorder, and a man from Edinburgh was charged with throwing missiles and possessing a firework. In total, 8 people were arrested. An investigation is underway into why 2 NHS patients had to wait almost a week in A&E in Lancashire. The Lancashire and South Cumbria Integrated Care Board is refusing to say which hospital or hospitals were involved. It says the cases were complex and not routine emergency admissions. Now, it's the holy month of Ramadan for Muslims across the world, but police are warning gangs of thieves are targeting Muslim households for gold jewellery. Here's our social affairs correspondent, Abby Jones.
When I saw that CCTV, my heart dropped. I didn't expect to see 3 men covered in balaclavas walking through my house, a place I consider my sanctuary.
The men, brandishing screwdrivers, ransacked this family home in Rochdale. Their target was gold.
They went through everything. They looked through cupboards, they flipped pillows over, they flipped couch cushions over.
This homeowner wants to share his story to warn others during Ramadan, but is too frightened to show his face.
There's a lot of word going around in the community of thieves entering homes looking for gold. Muslim people will become more of a target for these types of things. They go to pray at mosques 5 times a day, and that just leaves the home more vulnerable.
This gold jewellery was taken in a burglary in Ashton-under-Lyne last year. Since last August, more than £1 million of family gold has been stolen in Greater Manchester.
This is a crime that really affects communities, and the type of valuables that they're targeting, which is family gold. I mean, it's sentimental value. It's been passed from generation to generations.
Greater Manchester Police has increased its patrols and is also knocking on doors to warn householders.
Hello. Hi. Hello. Hi. I'm PC Latif.
Offering advice like leaving lights on and storing gold away from the home.
When we go to mosque, we should be concentrating on what's going on in mosque to our prayers. But in the back of the head, we're thinking that, I left my house empty.
The thieves caught on this CCTV weren't able to find what they were looking for.
Every single noise keeps reminding us of that time. We lock everything because these thieves, they're clever.
Abby Jones, BBC North West Tonight, Rochdale.
There's lots more on the BBC News website tonight. Barrow Council says it will fund swimming lessons at the town's leisure centre after 2 rescues at half-term raised issues about swimming competences. Edale Mountain Rescue Team were called to help a climber who fell from Stanage Edge in the Peak District. And Lancaster City Council has joined calls for a new station in Morecambe to support attractions like the Eden Project. Those stories and many more online and on the BBC News app. In football and League Two, a late equaliser denies Stockport County all 3 points away to Crawley Town. It ended 1-1. That leaves the Hatters 4 points behind the leaders Mansfield with a game in hand. Here's the weather with Kay.
Hello again, good evening. Well, it's been a mild day today. We actually got 15 degrees in parts of the northwest. We hold on to the mild air until we get towards the weekend. Rain in the forecast, I'm afraid, as we head overnight tonight. Some showers too, and further rain pushes up from the south as we head through tomorrow. So cloud continues to thicken overnight. We get some outbreaks of rain, the odd bit heavy, dry for a time, and then showers start to pile in. And again, some of these could be on the heavy side. Quite blustery conditions overnight. Lows of around 10 or 11 degrees, but gusting around 30 or 40 miles per hour, especially for the Isle of Man and coastal parts. So tomorrow we have those early showers around, but they will clear through, and actually it's going to brighten up. The odd shower or two into the afternoon, but for most of us it should be dry. And again, temperatures very similar to today, so I do think we'll get 15 degrees again, especially further south that you are, and the winds will be much lighter. Wednesday is going to be a wet start. It'll turn drier, but we hold on to the clouds, still mild until the end of the week. That's it from me. Night-night.
And that's all from the Late Team. We're back with bulletins in BBC Breakfast. Until then, from the Late Team, have a very good night. Bye.
So how was your day?
The usual.
Before the new series starts, watch all episodes of Blue Lights on BBC iPlayer.
Welcome to breakfast.
Thanks for joining us.
Hello. You're going to have a great time.
Remember, Kev, you aren't getting any younger.
Sun up, I think, in about 10 minutes' time.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. You've been up there and looked down at us here. Right, let's go live to Westminster.
Today is going to be much colder than of late.
We do want to hear your stories.
Oh, he does smell good, actually.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, thank you very much.
Start your day the BBC Breakfast way on BBC One and iPlayer.